It's like a sound. Can you see something blue looking at me? I think Charles needs to put on it. He looks so ugly.
Stop playing with me.
And he looks like a monkey.
Look at Rika Roundtree, an 8-year-old girl full of life and creativity. She adored her dolls as if they were her own children, and her smile could lift anyone's spirits. In these photos, she seems like any other happy youngster, doesn't she? But what you can't see in these scenes is Rika's agony behind closed doors, which was so intense that it took her life. Rika was beaten, hungry, and silenced in ways that no kid should have had to go through. And it did not happen in secret. Her injuries were evident, and her calls for aid were heard, but no one responded in time. Rika's school noticed injuries and unusual conduct in the months before her death. Investigators discovered horrifying video footage of Rika being assaulted by her father's girlfriend, Cynthia Baker. Then there came the text messages, cold, harsh remarks between two people who were supposed to care for her, arranging punishments as if Rika's life didn't matter. This is a tale of unfathomable brutality, about a little girl stuck in a family where love has been replaced by violence. And it's the narrative of a system that was aware Rika was in danger but failed to take action. She was a tiny girl begging for assistance in a world that wouldn't listen. How can anything like this happen? How can an innocent youngster slide between the gaps, despite the fact that teachers, neighbors, and even child protection authorities have heard his cries? This isn't simply a narrative about abuse. It's about how a flawed system allowed it to continue. Welcome to Unseen True Crime Stories headquarters. I want to thank you, my fantastic viewers and subscribers, for your support. Your participation in these tales, expressed via likes, shares, and comments, contributes to their significance. If you're new here, please subscribe and join our expanding community of true crime aficionados. So, let's get started. Rika Roundtree was a small girl like so many others, overflowing with joy, inventiveness, and infinite love before she made headlines. Rika was born in 2008 and grew up in a family where her mother, Antonetta Simmons, did her best to offer a feeling of stability despite the fact that the world around them was unraveling. Rika had a captivating personality, and her delight looked limitless, like a never-ending light. She had a unique ability to make everyone around her feel special, whether via amusing songs or meaningful remarks. Rika has the ability to illuminate even the darkest of rooms. Rika loved dolls, which was one of her biggest delights. But they weren't just toys for her. They were her universe. Rika adored her dolls as if they were her own children. She would clothe them lovingly, feed them, and tuck them in at night, creating a world that was both secure and enchanting. Rika saw it as more than simply play. It was an escape to a world where she could be the guardian and the harsh realities of reality could not affect her. Rika's identity was not only determined by her imagination. She was nice and considerate, which made her the apple of her mother's eye. Her mother refers to her daughter as her shadow. Wherever I went, she was right there with me, and recalls. She was not only my daughter, but also my dearest friend. We'd laugh and play together, and every day was like a new experience. However, no family is exempt from life's trials. Rika's world started to shift in 2016 in ways that no kid should ever go through. And a single mother was suffering financially. The weight of financial difficulty weighed down on her, and she was faced with a choice that no parent wants to make. Desperate to maintain a roof over their heads and food on the table, and made a decision that permanently changed Rika's life. In order to survive, and began selling drugs. It was not motivated by avarice, but by the crushing burden of existence. N's actions were desperate, but not malicious. But in September 2016, her action resulted in her arrest. For Rika and her elder brother, this was the point at which their lives became unclear. Rika was removed from her mother and put in the care of her biological father, Richard Roundtree, whom and had never entirely trusted. N's heart crushed that day. She asked the authorities not to send Rika to live with her dad. She sensed something was wrong, but her warnings went unheard. I begged them not to send her there, and subsequently recounted. I knew she would not be safe. I informed them something was wrong, but no one listened. She also said they didn't listen and didn't care. They simply saw my arrest, not the attachment I had with my kid. They didn't mind that I knew her better than anyone. They didn't listen when I warned them she wasn't safe there, and was unaware, and the authorities decided to disregard that Rika was not just going to live with her father. She was entering a household with a history of abuse and neglect. Cynthia Baker, Richard's girlfriend, would also be there. Cynthia had a documented history of abuse, including a previous accusation of trying to drown a stepchild. It was a history that should have triggered red lights right away, but DCFS chose to overlook the warning indicators. DCFS made a crucial judgment. They put Rika in a household where her safety was far from assured. They saw Richard as a safer alternative, dismissing Ann's warnings and the danger lurking in the shadows of her new house. What they couldn't see, or decided not to see, was the trauma that Rika would face. Rika's life had changed from the beginning. She was no longer a treasured kid, nor was she regarded as a daughter at all. She was seen as a burden, a nuisance to be torn down. Cynthia made sure of it. At barely 8 years old, Rika was exposed to cruel and demeaning punishments. She was compelled to handle big cans of food, her little arms quivering beneath their weight. These torturous sessions lasted hours, not minutes or seconds. Cynthia would strike out whenever her arms drooped from tiredness. The beatings became commonplace, a daily occurrence. Rika's isolation was total. She was not permitted to have meals with the family. While the other youngsters ate, Rika sat alone, hungry and humiliated. Her clothes were ragged, hand-me-down garments that showed signs of neglect. She didn't have a bed, only a chilly, bare mattress on the floor where she could rest after a long day. Her favorite dolls? They were completely demolished. The world she had constructed, the pleasure she once discovered, was gradually taken away from her. But physical violence was just the beginning. The emotional torture was even greater. Cynthia intended to shatter not only her body, but also her soul. She cut Rika off from her family and from the spirit of what it meant to be a kid. A small girl whose childhood was supposed to be full of joy and love, but was instead consumed with terror. The Department of Children and Family Services had several opportunities to act, yet they consistently failed. Multiple allegations from teachers, neighbors, and even concerned school personnel voiced concerns about the abuse occurring in the Roundtree residence. However, the system failed to safeguard her. Let's rewind. In early 2016, a local elementary school teacher spotted bruising on Rika's arms. She reported it to DCFS, who launched an inquiry. Caseworkers went to the Roundtree residence, but nothing came of it. Weeks passed, yet the bruises persisted. In September 2016, another instructor observed marks on Rika's face. This time, the complaint went directly to DCFS, but the caseworker merely tagged it as investigated and closed it with no further action. No one checked on Rika to see whether she was okay. Rika began third grade at Fox Creek Elementary in Bloomington in the autumn of 2018, when she was just 8 years old. Cynthia's 6-year-old daughter's kindergarten classroom would see yet another weird and scary episode, prompting another DCFS inquiry. It all began one day when Fox Creek staff observed something strange. Rika was going to school without a winter coat, despite the frigid Illinois conditions. The school staff, out of pure goodwill, took it upon themselves to present Rika with a warm coat, which every kid deserves. Cynthia, however, responded angrily rather than gratefully. She came into school, enraged, accusing the staff of partiality. She was enraged that they were choosing Rika above her own kid, who, by the way, already had her own winter suit. The weird and upsetting event did not stop there. Only days later, on December 10th, 2018, DCFS received another complaint of abuse involving Rika. Rika had missed 2 days of school, only to return with 2 black eyes, each at varying stages of healing. This was the turning moment. Once again, the system had the opportunity to interfere. DCFS sent Patricia Shannon, a child safety expert, to conduct an investigation. This wasn't the first time Rika had suffered such damage, but despite its recurrent failures, the system was still functioning. Shannon came at school, prepared to ask Rika about the wounds on her face. Holly Bellato, the school nurse, raised worry about Rika's apparent injuries, saying they did not seem to be from an accidental fall. Despite the nurse's evidence, Rika was once again too terrified to speak up. She told Miss Shannon that she had been out ill one day and then fell on her toys while storing them in her closet, a credible explanation if the truth were that easy. Rika's mother, Anne, had a terrible sensation that Rika was reluctant to tell the truth. She was terrified Rika would continue to lie to protect the people who had mistreated her, and that admitting the truth would result in much greater punishment. A youngster should not have to live with the fear of being punished for revealing the truth. Even after receiving this complaint, DCFS continued to try to interfere. They requested Richard and Cynthia to take Rika to the doctor. In a worrying turn, Richard informed DCFS that Rika's doctor was on vacation and that, despite his daughter's evident injuries, they couldn't afford the emergency hospital visit. It would cost $200, he explained. But it wasn't just about the money. The true problem arose when Cynthia declined to transport Rika for additional medical care. She informed DCFS that Rika's medical card had expired and that she just did not have enough time with the other children to care for the one who needed it the most. The unwillingness to seek medical treatment did not stop there. Cynthia was ordered by the doctor in Pontiac to take Rika for an X-ray to determine the severity of her injuries. But, once again, she disobeyed the directions. Instead, she disregarded the X-ray as unnecessary, citing her busy schedule. Cynthia had shrugged off the need for good medical treatment before, and it would not be the last. On December 11th, 2018, Cynthia's adolescent daughter was interviewed mere hours after receiving a call from DCFS. The daughter, who was not home when Rika allegedly fell on her toys, seemed to know more than she had said. She acknowledged that Rika had described the event, albeit the specifics were hazy. The same day, DCFS tried to talk with Cynthia's 6-year-old daughter, but Cynthia refused. She obstructed their efforts, blocking a thorough probe into the household's maltreatment. It was becoming evident that, despite accumulating evidence, the system was failing to safeguard Rika. Rika's school counselor phoned DCFS again, this time to report that Rika was withdrawing. Her grades dropped, and she was exhibiting indications of serious mental turmoil. Despite the continuous complaints, caseworkers only came to the house a couple more times. They saw the injuries and heard the tales, yet they all went without giving any meaningful help. Despite accumulating evidence that something went dreadfully wrong, the case was always described as resolved. Rika's health deteriorated throughout the course of months. By April 2019, she had become noticeably weaker. Her formerly brilliant eyes have become dull and distant. Her instructors, who had known her since kindergarten, noticed a significant difference. The girl who used to laugh and engage enthusiastically in class had retreated. She no longer lifted her hand or smiled. She stopped speaking. Mrs. Harris, one of Rika's instructors, described how Rika seemed to shrink in front of her. She used to arrive to school full of energy, but by spring, she was scarcely there. She sat at her desk, scarcely able to look at anybody. It was as if she was afraid to even laugh, the instructor said. She was quite quiet. She was usually the first to volunteer, but now she refuses to speak up in class. And every time I inquired whether she was all right, she would just answer, "I'm okay." If I could see injuries on her arms, neck, and legs. I had previously reported it and continued to do so, but nothing changed. However, on the night of January 6, 2018, Cynthia Baker pushed her too far. The penalties had grown more regular and harsh. What occurred that night remains a mystery, but one thing is certain. Rika's body, already damaged and shattered by months of abuse, could no longer resist the torture. On that fateful night, Rika's little body succumbed to the assault. She was gone. As the medical personnel tried tirelessly to rescue her, the truth dawned. Rika had endured far too much. The life draining from her little body was not a random act of destiny. It was the outcome of an unthinkable, long-term pattern of abuse. So, with no more fight in her, Rika Roundtree was proclaimed dead at the age of 8. She was gone. Rika's physique, spoken narrative or words, could no longer convey. The nurses and physicians saw it. Bruises of all sizes, some new, some old, covering her petite body. Her back, arms, and even her face displayed the scars of months of torture. Her flesh showed signs of being assaulted with fists, weapons, and even shoes. It was evident that this was not an accident. Rika had undergone relentless torture. Dr. Matthew Fox conducted an autopsy on Rika Roundtree, age 8, on January 26, 2019, at the Peoria County Coroner's Office. What he discovered was nothing short of sad, a terrible testimonial to the torture this little child had suffered. Dr. Fox's report described an unfathomable number of injuries. More than 60 scars covered Rika's little body. Her face, chin, mouth, chest, back, forearms, hands, buttocks, thighs, and legs all exhibited the brutal scars of her misery. Those scars, however, were just on the surface. Inside, the destruction was devastating. Dr. Fox discovered an ileal perforation, a tear in the last part of the small intestine, adhesions in the abdominal cavity where scar tissue had formed inside her abdomen, bruises on her face and upper arm, bleeding around the pancreas, pulmonary edema, or fluid in her lungs, cerebral edema, fluid buildup around her brain, and an abdomen filled with blood, indicating massive internal trauma. Dr. Fox determined that Rika's death was caused by peritonitis, a serious infection of the abdominal lining. This illness, induced by a blunt force injury, resulted in severe inflammation and infection. Her little body was just unable to fight longer. Peritonitis does not need to be lethal. It may be treated if detected early. It is diagnosed via X-rays, blood tests, scans, and, in certain cases, exploratory surgery. Rika had been vomiting for at least 2 days before her death. She complained of stomachache. Cynthia Baker herself stated Rika had impaired vision and difficulty maintaining her balance. Those were obvious, urgent indicators that something was very wrong. Rika's life may have been saved if she had sought medical attention, but she wasn't. Rika's calls for aid were disregarded, and her misery rejected. She was left for dead. Exactly 5 days after Rika's death, on January 31st, 2019, the Department of Children and Family Services received a new report. This time, it claimed that Richard Roundtree and Cynthia Baker had breached the safety plan by maintaining contact with their surviving children. It begs a scary question. Were they attempting to trick the youngsters into maintaining their secret? Were they attempting to dominate the narrative before the truth could be revealed? Even though no criminal charges have been filed, Richard and Cynthia retained an attorney right away. They didn't have a funeral or a monument. Instead, they transported Rika's remains to a funeral parlor in Gilbert for cremation. There is no ceremony or final farewell. But Rika would not be forgotten that quickly. On February 2nd, 2019, right before her cremation, McLean County officials intervened. They took Rika's corpse to do a second, more thorough autopsy. This time, Dr. Scott Denon, chief forensic pathologist, conducted the examination. Rika's corpse was burned on February 11th, after the second autopsy was finished. On February 11th, 2019, Richard and Cynthia's other children were removed into protective care. For those youngsters, the horror may have finally ended. However, for Rika, it was much too late. What remains of the wounds she left not just on her little, bruised body, but also on the hearts of all who have heard her tale. Nonetheless, Cynthia Baker, the lady guilty for this savagery, showed no regret, anguish, or grief. Instead, she was fixated on something genuinely shocking: the devastation Rika had left behind. Witnesses said that Cynthia's initial remarks after learning that Rika had died were not about her child's life being taken. No, it was about the puke on the ground. "You better clean that up. It's disgusting," she added, unconcerned about the fact that her actions had just resulted in a child's death. That instant revealed all you needed to know. Cynthia did not care about Rika's life or her pain. Only the hassle of cleaning up after a deceased kid seems to bother her. However, the entire extent of what had occurred in that home remained unknown until detectives discovered something that changed everything. When they looked through Cynthia's phone, they discovered videos that would torment the country. There were videos that exposed everything. Cynthia's iCloud account has unsettling video that depicts the hidden reality. These weren't simply benign recordings. They were proof of an abusive existence, one in which Rika was nothing more than a punching bag for Cynthia's brutality. The footage was terrible. In one video, Cynthia can be seen shouting at Rika and pushing her to do mundane activities under fear of punishment. In another, she violently abuses the youngster. Rika's petite body trembles in dread as she tries in vain to defend herself. It was cruelty documented on video, providing conclusive evidence of the abuse she underwent. These films, which were previously concealed from the public, now served as indisputable proof that screamed louder than words. What had previously been a silent, unseen horror for Rika was suddenly evident to everyone. As detectives and prosecutors saw the video, their astonishment and bewilderment were obvious. How has this gone overlooked for so long? How could a small girl suffer such agony for months, if not years, without someone intervening to stop it? When the videos were disclosed to the press, the people responded quickly. Outrage erupted on the streets, and newsrooms were inundated with calls. The community, previously oblivious, wanted answers. How had this continued for so long? Why hadn't someone stepped in to rescue Rika? This was no longer about a single broken household. It was a wake-up call to the whole nation. How could the system have failed so completely? How could those who were meant to be protecting youngsters like Rika turn a blind eye? Cynthia Baker was arrested on April 24, 2019. She faced a litany of accusations, including first-degree murder, severe violence, and many counts of child abuse. The wheels of justice were finally turning. For once, it seemed like the judicial system was reacting to the urgency of the situation. However, the war was not over. Cynthia's arrest was simply the beginning of a protracted court battle. The people paid great attention, and the media covered every detail. Every twist in the case was analyzed by a country still reeling from what had transpired. Rika's family experienced unimaginable emotional agony. Rika's mother, Anne, was forced to cope with the heartbreaking repercussions of losing her child. Every day, she had to confront the heartbreaking realization that she could not protect Rika. She once said, "Every day without her feels like a lifetime. I wish I could have protected her. I failed her. I'll always fail her." Rika's immediate relatives were not the only ones who suffered. This tragedy ripped through the whole community. Friends, neighbors, and instructors all looked back with deep sorrow. Cynthia Baker, accused of the horrible murder of Rika Roundtree at the age of 8, was on one side of the courtroom as the proceedings began. On the other side, the prosecution is committed to deliver justice to the young child who was never given a chance. The prosecution's case was both straightforward and unsettling. They started with forensic proof, the kind that never lies. Rika's physique, once vibrant, was now a somber reminder of the suffering she'd endured. Her little physique was covered in bruises, each of which told a narrative of brutality and anguish. Burns disfigured her flesh, the result of severe punishments imposed on her for far too long. However, internal injuries sealed the deal. An autopsy showed the truth. Rika's abdomen had been severely wounded, resulting in burst organs and a large rip that caused peritonitis, poisoning her insides. That injury was the fatal strike that ended her life. And the study made it obvious that these were not the results of a single occurrence, but rather a pattern of systemic abuse. Then came the videos, which were concealed in Cynthia Baker's iCloud account. They were awful evidence of Rika's mistreatment. No youngster should ever be subjected to such grainy material. But there they were, Rika, trembling, tormented by the woman who should have loved and protected her. Cynthia screamed at Rika in one video, forcing her to scrub floors for hours on end as her little arms trembled with tiredness. Another spotted Cynthia hitting Rika across the face, and the child's look was one of horror as she struggled to hide herself from additional hits. It was horrible, and the jurors understood. There was no denying what they were seeing. The video was a game changer. Cynthia's doom was sealed not only with evidence, but with proof. The jurors were startled and could not turn away from the reality. But the trauma did not stop with the videos. Cynthia's own children, flesh and blood, were summoned to the stand. They had to tell the misery they had endured in secret for so long. Their voices quivered, and the recollections were too terrible to endure. They'd seen it all: beatings, seclusion, and brutality that transformed a home into a jail. One of her daughters described how they would find Rika sobbing in hidden places, too scared to approach their mother. They saw Cynthia's rage flare up at the slightest error, and Rika's innocent face was bathed in tears, pleading for forgiveness that never came. By the time Rika's relatives entered the stand, the courtroom was filled with raw emotion. Rika's mother, and stood there with red eyes and a shaky voice. She told about a tiny child who liked to play and would rush to her with delight and excitement. But suddenly that kid was gone, her brilliant soul extinguished in the most horrible manner possible. Ann's comments were filled with grief as she reflected on her daughter's life. It was the sound of a mother, broken yet determined to be heard. And through her tears, she made it clear, "I do not want my daughter's death to be forgotten. I want everyone to know what happened to her." The trial lasted many weeks, but the ultimate conclusion was unambiguous. Cynthia Baker was convicted of first-degree murder. The truth had been revealed, and the jury was convinced. This lady was guilty for the murder of an innocent kid. However, on July 14th, 2019, Cynthia Baker's destiny was sealed: life in jail with no prospect of release. The judge's remarks were definitive. There would be no second chances for the mother who had taken the life of an innocent child. Yes, it was a modest win for justice, but it could not bring Rika back. It could never heal the wounds or years of misery. All that left was the brutal reality. One life had been stolen, and it was lost forever. While Cynthia faced her day of reckoning, Rika's father, Richard Roundtree, was also dealing with the repercussions of his own failure. For years, Richard had seen his daughter struggle under the house of his companion, Cynthia. He saw the bruises and heard the screaming, yet he decided to do nothing. He failed her. Richard was aware of the abuse and what was going on, but he chose to remain silent. He let it happen, and for that, he would also be held responsible. A series of text conversations exchanged between Richard and Cynthia corroborated this. The disturbing text exchanges between Richard Roundtree and Cynthia Baker revealed a much worse scenario than anybody could have guessed. These communications, received between July and September 2018, indicated not just their strong hatred for tiny Rika, but also their direct involvement in the cruelty she suffered. They wanted her gone. They talked about her in ways that no kid should ever be spoken of. On July 16, 2018, Cynthia described Rika as a little hard-headed. Just a few days later, on July 19th, Cynthia told Richard that she thought Rika should leave. Richard said, "It is, babe." This wasn't simply a statement of exasperation. It was an agreement to get rid of a little child in need of love and care. In another message, Cindy said, "I'm not talking to that little girl. She never tells the truth until you have a belt around her." As if slapping a youngster into submission was an appropriate method of obtaining the facts. Later, she texted Richard, "I love you too, but damn, I really hate your daughter." The remarks were frigid, but the hate was sincere. And it was scary. The messages did not end there. Cynthia contacted Richard on September 5th, 2018, saying, "I told Rika she was playing in the dark and hit her eye." Richard said, "Sounds good to me." A planned falsehood about the harm they were causing to a vulnerable infant. And how did they come to feel this approach was acceptable? Nothing more than a warped collaboration. As horrifying as these messages were, as insights into Rika's suffering, nothing could have prepared those in the courtroom for what they were about to see. Videos that would reveal the full degree of Rika's fear at the hands of individuals who should have loved and protected her. So on August 12, 2019, Richard Roundtree entered a plea agreement. He received an 8-year jail term in return for pleading guilty to charges of endangering the life of a child. 8 years is a little price to pay for a dad who permitted his daughter to be tortured and murdered. It wasn't quite enough. However, it served as a reminder that Richard's inactivity had contributed to the disaster. And, although his punishment was much less harsh than Cynthia's, it was still a price to pay for a father's failure to safeguard his kid. Rika's death showed major deficiencies in the Department of Children and Family Services. Multiple allegations of abuse were submitted by teachers and others, but no significant action was taken. These mistakes were not unique. They exposed a flawed system riddled with understaffing, inadequate training, and bureaucratic red tape. Ann's effort has resulted in significant improvement. In 2020, Ann collaborated with politicians to design a measure intended at increasing accountability within DCFS. Known colloquially as Rika's Law, the proposal asks for tougher regulation of child welfare situations, obligatory background checks for all caregivers, and frequent follow-ups on alleged abuse. While Rika's Law is still in development, it is an important step in ensuring that no other kid slips through the gaps of a broken system. Ann's drive is encouraging change, one policy at a time. Rika's tale is more than simply a tragedy. It is about the lessons we must learn as a community. It is about the collective obligation we all have to safeguard the most vulnerable among us. It's about the warning signals that were overlooked, the screams for assistance that went unanswered, and the systems that failed to act when it counted the most. It serves as a reminder that safeguarding children is our collective obligation, not simply that of parents and teachers. Rika's tale prompts us to raise difficult questions. How can we guarantee that no kid suffers in silence? How can we hold systems responsible for failing to safeguard people they are supposed to serve? Rika's light was doused much too soon, but her tale will live on as a beacon of change. Justice for Rika is justice for all children. Let her tale serve as a reminder to never look away, to never remain quiet, and to always protect those who cannot defend themselves. Which part of the story moved you the most? Please share your ideas in the comments below. And while you're here, make sure to check out our other videos, like them, and subscribe to help support our channel.